The apocalypse arrived, and acid rain fell for 3 whole months, leaving the world in ruins, with fog shrouding the cities. In our past life, when the apocalypse came, we took in our second uncle's family who had nowhere to go. Never expecting they would turn out to be more terrifying than the apocalypse itself, they shamelessly seized our home, forcing us onto the streets, where we ultimately met a tragic end under the corrosive acid rain. Little did we know our entire family would be reborn 1 month before the apocalypse. This time, we just want to keep our loved ones close and live out the rest of our days in peace. I closed my eyes, my brows tightly furrowed, the acid rain scorching my skin as rainwater, sweat, and blood clung stickily to my clothes. It felt as though I were trapped in a fiery hell. I struggled desperately, trying to escape the scorching heat. Suddenly, in the midst of my struggle, I sat up abruptly, gasping for air. It took a while before my consciousness gradually returned. Before me was a dimly lit room, the bedding clean and fragrant, with not a trace of the acid rain stench. Beneath me was an electric blanket that had been left on for who knows how long, burning hot to the touch. The phone by my pillow kept ringing. Feeling somewhat numb, I mechanically picked up the call. "Hello, Ian. We'll arrive in M City tomorrow. Remember to come pick us up at the station at 3 p.m. with your family." The line was a bit noisy, and my second aunt's sharp voice came through. Hearing these familiar words, I suddenly remembered. This was 1 month before the apocalypse. My second uncle's family was coming to visit us during their winter break and had called ahead to let us know. I couldn't quite believe it. I quickly got out of bed and pulled open the curtains. Sunlight instantly flooded into the room. A sight unseen since the apocalypse began. My eyes reddened. Outside, the sky was blue with white clouds, and everything remained orderly, showing no signs of the acid rain that would later corrode the world. "Hello, Ian. Are you still listening to me?" The voice of my second aunt still came through the phone, but I hung up directly. The phone's lock screen appeared on the display. December 25th, 2036, exactly 1 month before the apocalypse outbreak. I've been reborn. Tears could no longer be held back. I'm back to the time before everything happened. This time, I must protect my family at all costs. In my previous life, my second uncle's family came to visit, but not long after the new year, acid rain fell without warning. The 6 of us were trapped at home, watching our food supplies dwindle day by day. In the month that followed, social order collapsed. People began killing and looting without hesitation, all for a bite to eat. Second uncle's family gradually revealed their true colors, occupying the rooms and forcing us into a cramped storage space. My parents, being kind-hearted, stopped me from resisting, unwilling to conflict with second uncle and his family, but their kindness became second uncle's leverage over us. When food was nearly exhausted, he demanded we go out to search for supplies. Little did we expect, we were robbed on the way back. Not only was all the food taken, but we also perished miserably under the corrosion of acid rain. At this thought, I quickly opened the bedroom door to find my parents. As the door swung open, I met their tear-filled eyes. They burst into tears and pulled me into a tight embrace, crying, "Ian." I understood then. They had also been reborn. Now, the 3 of us would stay together, no matter what. Mom prepared a lavish lunch, all dishes I love. We gathered around the table, the familiar aroma lingering in the air. Sunlight streaming into the room, warming everything. Mom and Dad kept putting food on my plate, and my tears fell uncontrollably again. I told my parents about second uncle and the others coming soon. Dad got up and went to the balcony to smoke. Mom held my hand. "Ian, your father and I have discussed it. We've decided to return to our hometown." My hometown is a small village in the mountains of M City. The young people who left the village for education have all bought houses in the city and are unwilling to return. There are only a few households left in the village, mostly elderly people without children to care for them. Originally, my father wanted to bring my grandfather to live in the city, but the old man had spent his whole life in the village and didn't want to uproot himself. My parents then spent money to renovate the old house, but last year, my grandfather passed away, and the house has been empty ever since. After some thought, I realized Mom's suggestion was excellent. The house back home had only been renovated 3 years ago, and everything inside was still practically new. Moreover, for the convenience of the elderly, The house was equipped with an independent water purification system and solar panels, plus there was a cellar underneath. It was practically a perfect doomsday fortress. What about second uncle and his family? I asked. If they want to live here, let them have it. Is this place really such a great spot anyway? Mom's voice trembled as she spoke. Indeed, in my past life. This building had several bullies, and our family suffered quite a bit because of them. I reached out and put my arm around Mom's shoulders. Mom, don't be afraid. In this life, we'll definitely be fine. The next afternoon, just as we had picked up second uncle's family, second aunt started complaining. Why did it take you so long? We agreed on 3 o'clock. It's freezing out here in the dead of winter. What if my precious baby gets cold? Hu Jiabao was the son of my second uncle. What my second aunt always boasted about in front of our family was that she had given birth to a son. She was the hero of the Hu family. My mother, on the other hand, only had me, a daughter, and this was something my aunt used to belittle her for a lifetime. Hu Jiabao sat behind me, kicking my seat violently with his feet. You pauper, you villain, are you trying to freeze me to death? I clenched my fists and ignored them. Last night, our family had already discussed a plan. When the time came, we would say we needed to return to our hometown to visit the graves, leaving the city house to them, and then we would slip away unnoticed. When that time comes, let's see how they manage to survive without us. Neither Dad nor I spoke, and the only sounds in the car were those of second uncle's family. Suddenly, a flash of red caught the corner of my eye. Dad, stop the car. My father immediately pulled over to the side of the road. What's wrong? I got out of the car, Dad. I'm going to buy some snacks for Jiabao. With that, I closed the car door and walked away without looking back. From a distance, I could hear second aunt's shrill voice coming from the car. At least she has some sense, when she gets married and is bullied by her in-laws. She'll still have to rely on our Jiabao. I ignored them and headed straight for the lottery shop I had just spotted. I remember, in my previous life, on this very day, someone won a 50 million yuan jackpot at this very lottery shop. The news was displayed on a banner outside the shop for days. Back then, I had even made a point of looking up the winning numbers, and I still remember them clearly now. So, without hesitation, I immediately bought a ticket with those numbers. The apocalypse is coming, and massive stockpiling is necessary. While order hasn't collapsed yet, everything still requires money to purchase. Clutching the lottery ticket in my hand, I felt grateful for having memorized the numbers. This will be my first step toward surviving the apocalypse. By the time I got home, it was already dinner time. As soon as I opened the door, I saw Hu Jiabao's toys scattered all over the floor. My parents were still busy in the kitchen, while my second uncle and his family had already seated themselves at the dining table and started eating. I quickly pulled my parents out to join us for the meal. Auntie's chopsticks were poking around in the dishes, turning them over and over, leaving her saliva on every dish. I say, elder sister, it's the new year. How come there are so few dishes? Not even any chicken, duck, fish, or meat. Our precious Bao isn't getting the nutrition he needs. I glanced at Hu Jiabao. The meat in his bowl was piled up like a mountain. At just 6 years old, he was 135 centimeters tall and weighed 72 kg, and they call that lacking nutrition. I bet there's nothing but fat on that kid, with hardly any bone to speak of. I forced a smile. Auntie, no need to rush. Dad has reserved a table at a fancy restaurant tomorrow. Feast awaits. Hearing this, my aunt finally shut her mouth and said nothing more. Eat up, eat up. Such good days won't last much longer. The next evening, as we gathered in the living room watching TV, just like in my past life, the news began reporting. Dark clouds had blotted out the sun in many foreign regions, with acid rain pouring continuously for half a month, showing no signs of letting up. I exchanged glances with my parents, and we all knew that there were only 28 days left before the acid rain arrived. Dad was the first to speak. Second brother, my father just passed away not long ago, and the old home hasn't been tidied up yet. We originally planned to go back after the new year to take care of it slowly, but who would have thought? The village had called us and said the walnut tree in front of the house had fallen, hitting the roof and making a huge hole. He told us to go back and check as soon as possible. Second brother, I'm really worried. That house was just renovated a few years ago, and my father's grave is right beside it. I can't let the old man rest in peace if something happens. I've already bought the train tickets, and I'll be leaving first thing tomorrow morning." Upon hearing this, second uncle immediately slammed the table and stood up. "So you're saying that since we just arrived today, you're already trying to kick us out? It's the middle of the New Year holiday, and prices are skyrocketing everywhere. What are we supposed to eat? Where are we supposed to stay?" Second aunt also put on a sour face. "Completely unwilling, exactly, big brother. We finally made the trip here, and you actually want to drive us away? What do you mean by that? That old walnut tree. It didn't fall earlier or later, but the moment we arrived, it just happened to collapse. Who would believe such a thing if word got out?" Seeing that a conflict was about to erupt, my mother quickly stood up to mediate. "Second brother, don't get upset. Your elder brother didn't mean it that way." Second uncle pointed at my mother's nose. "Then what did you mean by it?" "Aw. What your brother meant was for you to just relax and stay at home, enjoy yourselves for a few days. Once we've sorted out the matters back at the old place, we'll return," my mother said, gently lowering second uncle's hand. "We have everything at home, lacking nothing. If you need anything later, just give us a call, and I'll have it delivered to your door." Hearing this, I saw uncle and aunt exchange a glance. Their eyes full of calculation. I sneered inwardly. What was there to calculate? Once we returned to our hometown, far from the Emperor's reach, and when the apocalypse came, would they even have the chance to seek revenge? Early the next morning, when we packed our luggage and left, uncle's family was still asleep. Upon arriving at the station, I asked my parents to return to M City first and shared many post-apocalyptic novels with them, urging them to thoroughly brush up on their knowledge of survival in such scenarios. I also requested that they rent a larger warehouse and, following the examples in the novels, carefully plan what supplies would be needed, then visit the city's major shopping centers to stock up. As for me, I decided to stay behind temporarily to cash in the lottery ticket. Truth be told, there was one more thing I didn't plan to tell them, but I was determined to do it. I stayed in the hotel for 3 days, finally waiting for the day to redeem the lottery ticket. Early in the morning, I rented a mascot costume and went to the lottery center to claim the prize. Seeing the bank notification on my phone, I was so happy I could almost fly. After that, I immediately transferred 20,000 yuan to my second aunt, asking her to take Hujub out to the amusement park. Then, I went to the supermarket and bought several sets of pinhole cameras and 2 extra-large suitcases. After doing all this, I took the items and returned to the residential area, hiding in a secluded spot in the garden to keep an eye on the building's entrance. True to my expectations, my second aunt didn't disappoint. In less than 10 minutes, the whole family came out dressed to the nines. I quickly went back home and installed the pinhole cameras, 1 set each in the kitchen, living room, bedroom, and balcony. I also emptied the fridge, not even sparing the condiments, leaving them with nothing but a small bunch of bok choy. Then I went to the bedroom and cleared out the remaining clothes and quilts, with the main goal of leaving nothing behind. Looking at the empty house, I left with satisfaction. Wait, there were still Hubao's snacks. I went back inside and took all the snacks, not even leaving a single candy wrapper. I distributed everything to the elderly folks downstairs in the neighborhood, and casually mentioned the acid rain abroad, reminding them to stock up on supplies. As for whether they took those words as rumors or seriously, that was no longer my concern. Afterwards, I quickly bought a plane ticket back to City M. Dad had just called to say everything was ready and waiting for my return. In City M, we stayed for another 5 days and bought quite a lot of things according to my parents' list: 300 pounds of rice and flour, 100 boxes of snacks, 100 boxes of various canned fruits, 20 boxes of vegetables, 100 boxes of dried seafood, 100 boxes of various preserved foods, 50 boxes of eggs and milk, 100 boxes of frozen foods, 50 boxes of various seasonings, 100 boxes of instant foods, 50 pounds each of various meats, and most importantly, 200 boxes of purified water, 100 boxes of various daily necessities, 100 boxes of sanitary pads, 100 boxes of tissues and towels, and 100 packets of vegetable and fruit seeds, along with 100 kilograms of fertilizer. Considering there might be no place to grow crops after the apocalypse, we also bought 50 large flower pots. In our previous life, we only survived until the 3rd month after the acid rain began, but according to the tropes of apocalyptic fiction, there might be other crises ahead that we don't know about yet, so, we added 10 ice makers, 10 warm air blowers, 12 electric blankets, 10 diesel generators, 10 boxes of various self-defense items, and 100 boxes of assorted medicines. Finally, we included 5 large freezers and 3 refrigerators. Seeing the rented warehouse packed to the brim, we felt an extraordinary sense of satisfaction. These past few days, I took some time to check the home surveillance footage, probably because of the 20,000 yuan I transferred. My second uncle and his family haven't been eating at home recently. He sleeps until the afternoon every day, wakes up, goes out to have fun, and only returns in the evening. So, he hasn't noticed that the house is empty and hasn't come to cause us any trouble. It's still a 5-hour journey from the city to our hometown. Dad went out to book a large truck. After discussing with my parents, we decided that Dad would drive the truck while I would drive a smaller car, each carrying a portion of the supplies. We'd make trips back and forth. Mom would stay at home to organize the supplies. No sooner said than done. That very night, we prepared everything and set off. Back in my hometown, although it's the same village, the houses in the mountains are mostly far apart, and even the roads in front of the houses were built at our own expense. Therefore, even with all our back and forth transportation, it didn't attract any attention. 5 days later, I collapsed on the sofa in my hometown, too exhausted to move. At this point, there were still 14 days left before the apocalypse arrived. The midday sun, filtering through the lush walnut tree in front of the door, spilled into the main room, slightly dispelling the winter chill. This house has 3 floors in total, plus a basement, offering ample space. The basement isn't an ordinary earthen cave either. To encase the water purification system, it was specially renovated with leftover cement and tiles from the house construction. It looks almost like a 4-bedroom, 2-living-room flat in a large single-story space, with no worries about leaks or issues with snakes, insects, rats, or ants. In the afternoon, Dad paced back and forth in the yard, then suddenly slapped his thigh and came inside. Standing before us, he declared, "There's something missing in our home." "What's missing?" Mom asked. "A courtyard wall." Dad pointed outside. "Look, without a wall, our home is completely open. If anything happens, there's no protection. It's just not safe." Dad always thinks ahead. Dad quickly made a phone call to arrange for a mason to repair the courtyard wall. He also requested that reinforced concrete be mixed into the wall, with an additional electrified iron fence installed inside it. Early the next morning, the masons arrived with all the materials, the best quality available. "What are you guarding against in your home?" one of them asked. "You've made it so secure, thickening and heightening the wall, plus adding an iron fence." "Ah." My dad handed him a cigarette. "We were already planning to build the wall. But then we heard that some wild beasts had appeared in the mountains. No one knows when they arrived. They've wandered into the village, raiding many homes and killing a lot of chickens and ducks. We're scared too," he added. "Master craftsman, I know it's tough, but if you can get it done within 3 days, I'll pay extra, double the pay." Hearing this, the old master happily accepted the cigarette and immediately called his crew to start working. Money makes the mare go. By the afternoon of the 3rd day, the courtyard wall was built, tall and thick. Once the electric fence was turned on, it became a true fortress for the apocalypse. That evening, we sat together comfortably for dinner while the evening news played on the TV. In the news, many places have started to experience rain, and experts predict that acid rain will follow. Citizens are advised to take protective measures and stock up on purified water. "Isn't this happening much earlier than in our previous life?" Mom put down her chopsticks and asked. "Yes, it's a few days earlier. I don't know the reason," Dad replied with a furrowed brow. I held my parents' hands and comforted them. "No matter the reason, as long as we're together as a family, guarding our home, we have nothing to fear." We calmly awaited the arrival of the apocalypse. On the 5th day before the apocalypse, dark clouds loomed for days. The air was stifling. Yet the rain refused to fall. I was charging power banks and tablets. After the apocalypse, water and electricity would gradually be cut off, so I had bought 200 high-capacity power banks, along with a pile of tablets and computers, preloaded with TV shows, movies, novels, and more. It was at this moment that Auntie called. "Hello, Luo-een, didn't your mom say the fridge at home was fully stocked? Why is it all empty now, Auntie, after so many days? I bet you only called because you've already eaten everything. Don't talk nonsense, it's the money you gave us. We haven't touched the fridge at all. If it hadn't been raining non-stop, I wouldn't even have opened it," Auntie retorted righteously. "It's raining in City M." I was somewhat surprised. The timeline seemed even earlier. "Stop with the useless talk. Hurry up and buy the food. Our precious is starving. And you'll see if we don't make trouble for you." With that, second aunt hung up the phone. I don't know when the wind started blowing, but it had been gusting for a while. I put down my phone and looked out the window. A raindrop hit the glass. Then, more raindrops began to fall, pattering lightly, and the mountains were instantly shrouded in a layer of mist. The apocalypse had officially begun. Early the next morning, I was woken up by a ringing sound. Glancing at my phone, it was my second aunt calling again. I hung up directly and then blocked all their contact information. Snuggled in the warm and cozy blanket, I turned over and fell back asleep to the sound of rain. I slept until noon and only woke up when my mom called me for lunch. I went downstairs and saw Dad sitting at the door smoking. I walked over and stood beside him. "Een. Look," Dad said, pointing in a direction. I followed his finger. The cement floor in the yard was covered in shallow pits, with wisps of white smoke rising from them. This rain was even more corrosive than in the previous life. Suddenly, I remembered the solar panels on the rooftop. Just as I was about to step out, Dad called me back. "Don't go. If we waited for you to wake up, we'd all be starving by now. I've already put away everything that needed to be stored. It's just that taking baths will be inconvenient from now on." I scratched my head and chuckled. "In winter, we don't need to bathe every day anyway. Besides, we can always boil water. What's urgent now is that this rain isn't right." "Yeah." My dad took a drag of his cigarette. "Looks like it might be worse than last time." At the dinner table, Dad made a decision. "Let's clean out the basement. We need to be ready to move down there at any time. This rain can even corrode concrete. No matter how new the house back home is, it's not built to withstand artillery shells. It's only a matter of time before the acid rain eats away at it." Thankfully, the basement wasn't skimped on during construction. That night, as I lay in bed, I opened the home surveillance feed. The moment I saw it, my fists clenched. The house had been ransacked by second uncle and his family. Trash was scattered everywhere, and the three of them were lounging on the sofa watching TV. With the coffee table covered in open snacks and cigarette butts. This home, though we've given it up, after living here for so many years, seeing it ruined like this still hurts my heart. I patted my chest, telling myself not to be angry, not to be angry. There will come a day when they'll be the ones embarrassed, and it won't be too far off. I opened the neighborhood chat group again, where the property management had posted a notice. It said that this acid rain was coming on strong, advising everyone to stay at home and avoid going out. If one must go outside, they must take proper protective measures. Due to acid rain, disasters have occurred in many areas, and citizens should pay attention to safety when going out. The government is actively working to combat the disaster and address the acid rain. The public is urged not to panic and to actively respond to the national call. In my previous life, I also received such a notice, but the acid rain kept falling, day after day, for 3 whole months without stopping. Along with the acid rain came not only disasters in many areas but also attacks from mutated animals, such as mosquitoes the size of fists. A single bite might cause anemia at worst, but the viruses they carried were exceptionally deadly, leaving almost no chance of survival. Rescue workers were completely overwhelmed, and hospitals were packed beyond capacity. Gradually, food shortages and scarcity of survival resources emerged, leading to the collapse of order. At that point, the most terrifying thing would be human nature itself. In my previous life, because the new year was approaching and my second uncle's family had arrived, my mother prepared a lot of holiday supplies and even slaughtered an extra pig. As a result, our family didn't leave the house during the first month of the rain. Later, the water and electricity were cut off, and food became scarce. We survived the acid rain and the blood-sucking mosquitoes, but we couldn't escape the persecution from my second uncle's family. This time, I won't let them off either. The next day, the sound of a car horn came from outside the courtyard gate. I poked my head out to look and saw the village chief and a young man arriving. My parents warmly welcomed the village chief and his companion. After sitting for a while, the village chief got to the point. Lao Luo, to be honest, we're distant relatives. From the same village, after all, no matter what. We're connected by family ties. My dad kept nodding in agreement. The village chief said, "You see, this acid rain came so suddenly, and many places have even suffered disasters, so the village has decided to pool everyone's resources for fair distribution, so we can all get through this difficult time together." My father and I exchanged glances, our eyes full of understanding. These people usually never visit, but as soon as something happens, they suddenly start acting like family. They talk about pooling resources, but who really knows how much each family will end up getting? My dad pretended to be troubled and scratched his head. "Ah, Chief, as you said, the acid rain came out of nowhere. Our family originally just came back before the new year to tidy up and visit my father's grave. We planned to finish up and then go back to celebrate the new year quietly. We didn't prepare much, and just as we were about to leave, the rain delayed us. We were actually thinking of asking the village if they could lend us a hand." Hearing this, the village chief's expression darkened. The young man beside him immediately jumped up. "You've got such a large truck hidden behind your house, clearly meant for transporting goods. How could you possibly have nothing? If you really have nothing, then why did you build such a sturdy, high wall around your yard, Luo Jian? What does the size of my family's truck or the height of our courtyard wall have to do with you? Just because of a truck and a wall, you assume we're hiding something." My father shot him a fierce glare. "Besides, we returned before the rain. Are you suggesting we can predict the future and came back prepared to take shelter?" This, Luo Jian was left speechless. Only when my father called out his name did I recognize him. It was Luo Jian, the notorious local thug and loafer in the village. Unlearned and unskilled, he spends his days stealing chickens and dogs in the village, but with some petty cunning, it's no wonder he could persuade the village chief to come to my house. Seeing the situation turning sour, the village chief tried to smooth things over. After sitting for a while, he took Luo Jian and left, but as I watched Luo Jian leave with that unyielding look on his face, I knew he hadn't given up. I shared my thoughts with my parents, and they agreed that Luo Jian wouldn't give up so easily. "So, we need to stay on high alert." During dinner, second uncle and the others called Mom's phone again. I directly took it, hung up, and blocked them, also blocking them in Dad's phone for good measure, so they could never find us again. I checked the surveillance footage and saw that after we hung up, second aunt was so furious she smashed a lot of things in the house. "Enough." Second uncle scolded her. "They're not answering. What's the use of smashing things here? Take out all the money you have. The most important thing now is to solve the immediate problem. Prices outside are getting higher and higher. If we don't buy food now, we won't be able to afford it later." But, second aunt hesitated. "This money is meant for Jiabao's future." Second uncle said, "We can't even afford to eat now. What's the point of saving it? Money can be earned again, but if we're gone, there's nothing left. I'll go out to buy supplies later. You stay home and take care of the child." I sneered. At least second uncle had some sense of priorities. At night, as I lay in bed playing with my phone, I heard the faint chirping of crickets outside. Without turning on the light, I tiptoed to the window and lifted a corner of the curtain. In the darkness, I could see several figures discussing how to climb over the courtyard wall. I was right. Luo Jian hadn't given up after all. I knocked on the door of my parents' bedroom next door and woke them up. Luo Jian went back and gathered 3 companions, all local ruffians from the village, agreeing to come together that night to explore my house. The walls were high, and it took them great effort to climb into the yard. At the main gate, I saw one of them pull out a wire and, with a few quick moves, pry open my front door. The 4 of them entered in the dark, rummaging around everywhere. Half an hour later, they still hadn't found anything and gathered again in the main hall. "Jianzi, didn't you say they had good stuff at their place? We've searched everywhere and haven't found even a thread." "Yeah, Jianzi, you better not be messing with us. How could that be? If there's nothing, why would they have such a big truck?" Luo Jian wondered as he sat down on the sofa. After a while, Luo Jian slapped his thigh. "I got it. When they were building the house, I came by for a free meal. At the time, they were digging a cellar. There must be a cellar. Let's search again. The good stuff is definitely hidden in the cellar. This Luo Jian really has some ideas in his head. Too bad he had to pick my house of all places. Well, sorry, but today you're going to learn a lesson. Who's there? What are you doing? My dad suddenly turned on the light. Standing at the doorway of the main room with a shovel in hand, his imposing presence instantly intimidated Luo Jian and his gang. All right, Luo Jian, still up to no good, huh? Watch me teach you a lesson today. With that, my dad raised the shovel, ready to strike. Luo Jian and the other three quickly climbed out through the window. In the yard, they were beaten by my father until they scattered in all directions, crying out in pain. Don't underestimate my dad just because he's older. He does manual labor regularly, so his grip is strong, and he didn't hold back at all. One of them tried to open the courtyard gate, but it wasn't an ordinary door and wasn't so easy to unlock. Seeing they couldn't escape through the gate, they attempted to climb over the courtyard wall instead. I quickly turned on the electric fence, and as soon as Luo Jian touched it, his hand turned red from the burn, and blisters formed instantly. The pain was so intense he couldn't even speak. The others couldn't stop their momentum in time before the fence and were all injured to varying degrees. Seeing no way to escape, they had no choice but to kneel and beg for mercy, swearing they would never dare to target our family again. After much pleading, my mother reluctantly took out her phone and called the village chief to come and pick them up. It wasn't until the early hours of the morning that the yard finally fell completely silent. None of us felt sleepy anymore, so we sat inside the house warming ourselves by the fire. Dad, do you think Luo Jian will come back? Hard to say right now. If food runs out later, then it's anyone's guess, Dad said, rubbing his hands together. For a while, the only sound in the room was breathing. With nothing else to do, I turned on the surveillance feed again to check on my second uncle's family. As soon as I opened the door, I saw second uncle stumbling into the house in a disheveled state. He dropped the bag he was carrying and collapsed onto the sofa, too exhausted to move. Second aunt quickly went to check the contents of the bag, just some ordinary instant noodles, biscuits, and the like, and not much of them either. She started complaining again. How come you were out for so long and only came back with this little? This won't last for more than a couple of meals, and besides, Jiabao won't get any nutrition from this. Second uncle angrily sat up and pointed at second aunt's nose, yelling, You still want nutrition? I had to run all over the place just to get this little bit. Everyone's scrambling for supplies out there. I had to hide until now just to make it back safely, or else we wouldn't even have this much. Andy shrank her neck in fear and whispered, I was just saying it casually. Casually saying what? Second uncle vented all his frustration on Auntie. The rest was just some meaningless chatter, occasionally mixed with a few curses directed at our family. I turned off my phone and didn't look at them anymore. It seems the situation in the city is even more chaotic than I imagined. This is just the beginning. Who knows how much worse it will get? I felt relieved in my heart. Thankfully, our family had returned to our hometown early. Although there are restless people here too, it's still better than the wolves and tigers in the city. At the break of dawn, Dad urged us to go to sleep while he stayed behind to keep watch. Half a month after the acid rain began, our family was busy packing our clothes. Over the past half month, the corrosiveness of the acid rain has grown increasingly severe. The cement ground in the yard has almost been completely eroded, and the house has developed numerous pits and holes. Even though Dad has been sealing the holes with cement every day, it can't withstand the relentless rain that never stops for 24 hours. Fortunately, when building the courtyard wall, Dad specifically paid extra to have acid-resistant materials mixed in. Therefore, under such intense acid rain erosion, only the courtyard walls remained intact. However, they were still concerned about the safety of the house. After an hour-long meeting and discussion, our family unanimously decided to move into the basement, with too many supplies. We barely managed to clear out 2 beds and moved some less essential items to a room next to the main hall, locking them away. When we initially bought the surveillance cameras, we purchased more than 4, anticipating they might be needed later. And indeed, they are now being put to use. I took out 2 and installed them on the first and second floors, in places sheltered from the rain, connecting them to the computer. This way, our whole family could see the outside situation while staying in the basement. Time passes unnoticed in the mountains, and another half-month slipped by in the blink of an eye. The fog in the mountains grew thicker. Before, we could still see the houses on the opposite hill, but now, even the canopy of the old walnut tree was barely visible, coupled with the erosion of acid rain. The once lush vegetation had long since withered and turned yellow. All around was quiet, with not a trace of life, as if the entire world had been reduced to just us. Fortunately, the days didn't feel dull or lonely. I helped my parents sort through supplies and gradually move them to the basement. In their free time, my parents scattered vegetable and fruit seeds into the soil of flower pots, eagerly awaiting the day they would sprout. From time to time, I exercised with my parents, doing some Tai Chi and such, leisurely and blissful. When I think of second uncle's family again, I check the surveillance feed. I see their home has already been taken over by two burly men. Second uncle lies on the ground, bruised and battered, his condition unknown. Second aunt cowers in a corner, clutching Hu Jiabao, all three of them noticeably thinner. I raise an eyebrow in surprise. I had expected them to hold out longer, but it seems the apocalypse has only been underway for a month, and casualties are already severe. I reviewed the surveillance footage from the previous month, starting from the night my second uncle went out to buy supplies. After that, he would leave the house almost every 2 or 3 days, but the things he brought back became fewer and fewer, while the money he spent kept increasing. Both my second aunt and second uncle complained, and Hu Jiabao often threw tantrums because he couldn't eat his fill. It was the first time my second uncle raised his hand to hit him. This kind of life lasted for over half a month, with frequent disasters occurring in many places. The minor disturbances in the city were no longer a priority for the already stretched thin authorities. The skyrocketing prices of supplies, empty stomachs, and unchecked theft and robbery gradually plunged the city into chaos. Later, second uncle also started joining the fights, but he was unlucky. The second time, he ran into the neighborhood bully, a muscular 180 cm, tall man wielding a spiked club, accompanied by his 178 cm, tall sidekick. Neither of them was any good. In the end, the ones who got subdued, without exception, were always second uncle and his group. From then on, second uncle became the bully's punching bag. Whether they were happy or not, he was their scapegoat. No matter what they did, second uncle was always the first to take the hit. If it weren't for the fact that the strong man truly looked down on second aunt, she probably wouldn't have survived the apocalypse either. Finally, one evening, second uncle's family discussed taking back what rightfully belonged to them. Unfortunately, they overestimated their abilities. In the end, second uncle passed out, and second aunt and Hu Jiabao's future days likely wouldn't be too good either. I let out a long sigh. The national notice issued by the property management was still pinned at the top of the neighborhood group chat, but it was just there for show. The group had been silent for days. The aroma of hot pot wafted in from outside the room, especially satisfying in this cold, continuous drizzle. After dinner, Dad and I watched an old movie in the living room while Mom cleaned up in the kitchen. Just as we were getting into it, suddenly, we heard Mom scream. We quickly got up and rushed to the kitchen, only to see a mosquito the size of a fist flying under the light bulb, buzzing incessantly. I exchanged a glance with Dad, then quickly turned around to fetch the insecticide we had prepared in advance, along with the electric mosquito swatter. Fortunately, there was only one for now, and it was quickly dealt with. We also disinfected the areas where the mosquito had flown by. These blood-sucking mosquitoes carry particularly dangerous viruses. We both knew in our hearts that since this one had appeared, there must be many more lurking unseen, ready to strike. Rainy days are the perfect season for mosquitoes to hatch. We quickly took out the mosquito-killing equipment we had prepared in advance and thoroughly searched every corner of the house. Sure enough, we found 3 more in the bathroom, along with some mosquito larvae. After a thorough cleanup, we took several protective measures before finally feeling at ease. The blood-sucking mosquitoes only existed for a short week, but even though our family had made foolproof preparations, my mother was almost bitten by one, fortunately. Just as the blood-sucking mosquito extended its proboscis, my father stunned it with an electric mosquito swatter and then suffocated it with insecticide. However, the mosquito's proboscis was quite sharp, and Mom still got a little hurt. Even though we quickly applied medicine to the wound, she had a fever for 2 days. 2 days later, her wound gradually healed, and the fever subsided. She looked quite energetic. We all breathed a sigh of relief. Winter in the mountains is always colder than in the city, but today I found the electric blanket too hot to bear, so I turned it off early. At midnight, I was about to put down my phone and go to sleep when I suddenly realized that I had turned off the electric blanket 2 hours ago. In the past, even just last night, I would have been unbearably cold by now, but today I didn't feel that way at all. I got up and went to the kitchen to check the thermometer. It had already risen to 26 degrees Celsius. A temperature unheard of for this season. I hurried to my parents' room and woke them up. Dad sat in the living room smoking, while Mom, wrapped in her clothes, still looked somewhat frail. After a long pause, Dad exhaled a long stream of smoke and said, "Actually, ever since the day the acid rain came, whether it's time or other things, they've all been different from the memories of our past life. Yin, while the water's still running, hurry and turn on the ice maker. Then bring out the fans, we need to be ready for the coming heat wave." Dad placed his hand on Mom's shoulder and pulled her close, comforting her worries. "Since it's come to this, we'll take it as it comes. This time, we're fully prepared, everything will be fine." After listening to Dad's words, my heart instantly calmed down. Yes, what is there to fear? Our family is together, and with so many supplies, even in the worst-case scenario, we wouldn't have any regrets. That night, we prepared everything and stood ready, awaiting the arrival of the extreme heat. Over the next 3 days, although the temperature remained stable at 26 degrees, a sudden swarm of mutated red-eyed rats caught us off guard. After a chaotic struggle, we finally figured out the fatal weaknesses of these rats and began handling them with ease. On the third afternoon, the sun pierced through the acid rain and the hazy mountain mist, casting its rays into the courtyard. Dad had just finished dealing with a red-eyed rat, tossing its corpse into a corner of the yard. Then, as soon as the sunlight hit the recently discarded rat, it instantly turned into a dried-up chip. Gradually, the other rat corpses previously thrown out also withered away in an instant, evaporating into nothingness. Seeing this, I threw the half-dead rat in my hand into the sunlight. It didn't even have a chance to struggle before drying up completely. Dad and I exchanged a glance, both realizing that the scorching apocalypse had arrived. At dinner, our whole family changed into cool summer clothes, and Mom prepared simple chilled jelly noodles. In just a few short hours, the temperature had soared to 42 degrees Celsius, with signs of continuing to rise. Fortunately, we lived in the basement, where the temperature was much better than outside, though still at 35 degrees Celsius. Early the next morning, I was woken up by the heat. The rain outside had stopped at some point, and the temperature had risen to a staggering 60 degrees, with 48 degrees indoors. I opened the door, and a wave of cool air instantly hit me, making every pore on my body relax in comfort. At some point, Dad had filled the living room with ice blocks, and with the fan constantly blowing on them, it felt just like having the air conditioning on. I lounged lazily on the sofa, waiting for Mom to serve me food. The seeds planted earlier have sprouted, forming a lush green patch. The next day, the temperature climbed to 65 degrees again, but perhaps due to the fog, the sun wasn't as scorching as it had been the day before. As the sun dipped westward, we had just finished eating when we heard car horns blaring outside. Checking the surveillance feed, we saw the village chief and Luo Jian again, but this time they had brought 2 additional men, all carrying shovels, clearly up to no good. Dad was right. Luo Jian indeed wouldn't give up so easily. 10 minutes later, the village chief sat smiling in the drafty living room, with Luo Jian and the other 2 men standing menacingly behind him. My dad handed over a cup of muddy water. "These days, I don't know what's going on. They're tough. Make do with this." Luo Jian jumped up instantly at the sight of the water. "What's with the fake kindness? We're starving, with not even grass to eat, while you all remain as plump as ever. And you still say times are hard." "Luo Jian," I was about to retort when the village chief cut me off. After speaking, the village chief continued to smile at my father. "Old Luo, at a time like this, there's no need to hide anything. We're all from the same village. We share both fortune and misfortune. Look, the village is full of elderly people with no one to rely on. With this year's weather, there's nothing left to eat. How are they supposed to survive? If your father were still here, he certainly wouldn't stand by and do nothing." I understood then. They were certain our family had plenty of supplies, Suppressing my anger, I said, "Village chief, when the village faces difficulties and needs help, that's the village committee's responsibility. Why keep picking on us ordinary folks? Besides, my family's house has been empty for nearly a year. What could possibly be left inside? Luo-in, you're just a junior. This isn't the place for you to speak up." The village chief scolded me in a low voice. My father smiled and tried to smooth things over. "Yin isn't that young anymore. Some matters should involve the younger generation. Look, even Luo Jian has been helping you out here and there, right? Old Luo, I won't beat around the bush with you. I'll speak plainly. The village is in trouble now, and every household should contribute. We all need to pull together to get through this difficult time." The village chief put away his fake smile. "If it's really inconvenient, we can always lend a hand." No sooner had he spoken than the two men behind him raised their shovels, glaring at us threateningly. Dad stood up and gave me a look. I immediately understood his meaning and moved toward the door. Luo Jian kept his eyes fixed on me, still harboring resentment over the incident last time when we caused him injury. Seeing that I was about to leave, he quickly stepped forward to stop me. "We can't let Luo-in go. She's going to turn on the electric fence." Luo Jian, along with the two men, moved to grab me, but my father swiftly turned around and pulled out the chainsaw he had hidden earlier, starting it up. Seizing the moment, I quickly ran behind the door to flip the switch for the electric fence. My father brandished the roaring chainsaw, while my mother picked up a stick and followed close behind, driving the village chief and his group out of the house. The last glimmer of the setting sun still lingered in my courtyard. Luo Jian stepped back and, in a moment of carelessness, exposed most of his back to the sunlight. The bare skin was instantly scalded, and blisters began to form before his eyes. Luo Jian let out a scream. The pain in his back made him unsteady on his feet, and he collapsed to the ground. His eyes closed as he passed out. Our family pressed forward relentlessly. Seeing they couldn't outrun us, the two men steeled themselves, grabbed their shovels, and charged at us. But how could that thing possibly compare to a chainsaw? It was torn to pieces in just a few strokes. Seeing they couldn't defeat my father, they tried to bypass him and target my mother. Realizing they were desperate enough to harm his family, my father no longer held back and charged forward, swinging the chainsaw. I quickly stepped forward, pulled my mother back, and retreated into the house. Amid the chaos, blood began to spray, and cries of agony rose one after another. The village chief and his group could only keep retreating. Chief, we can't retreat anymore. Behind us is the electric fence," one of the men stammered in fear. The village chief snapped back to reality, his father advancing with a chainsaw before him, and the electric fence looming ominously behind. "Old Luo," the village chief shouted, "Old Luo, calm down. Luo San's hands are about to break, and Luo Si is covered in injuries because of you. Do you really want to take a life?" My father snorted coldly. "What kind of world do you think this is? Do you think I don't know? Today, when this saw cuts down, let's see who's worse off." Seeing that he couldn't fool my father, the village chief panicked. In fact, not long after the apocalypse began, they ran out of food. Unlike in the city, where you could still buy things at high prices, most of the village was self-sufficient, with only a small shop far away. They had long been starving to the point of looking sallow and emaciated. If it weren't for Luo Jian's instigation, claiming that my family had good stuff, and driven by greed, they wouldn't even have the energy to move. The village chief kept begging for mercy, almost on the verge of kneeling. At their feet, a pool of blood had formed. Luo San's arm hung limp, neither fully severed nor intact. Luo Si, having lost too much blood, swayed unsteadily, while Luo Jian remained unconscious at their feet, motionless. Dad saw that things had gone far enough and didn't want to overdo it. "Chief," he said, "today I still have some humanity left, so I'll address you as chief, but if something really happens one day, no one will spare a thought for you." I received my father's instructions to turn off the power grid. The village chief dragged Luo Jian away, and the group left in disgrace. In the darkness of the night, my father stood motionless in the yard. My mother quickly ran out and pulled him back inside. Only then did I see clearly that my father was also covered in blood. Sweat and blood had mixed together, soaking his clothes completely. "Dad," I called out softly, feeling somewhat worried. "Yin, don't be afraid, Daddy's here." Just this one sentence made my nose sting, tears uncontrollably welling up, my heart aching yet full. This is family. Dad went to take a shower, and Mom walked over to me, pulling me back into the basement, the stifling heat instantly fading by half. Yin, Mom gently hugged me. Mom knows that you're struggling with the guilt over Luo-san and Luo-si getting hurt today, but we don't know how long this apocalypse will last, and people's hearts will only grow darker. Don't be afraid. Mom and Dad will always be by your side. Listening to Mom's words, much of the worry and discomfort in my heart faded, replaced by even greater resolve. That night was the most peaceful sleep I'd had since the apocalypse began. The heat wave has persisted for an entire month, and the electricity in the mountains was cut off as early as the second day after the village chief and his group arrived. However, our home is fully equipped, so daily life hasn't been significantly affected. Worried about my second uncle in the city, I checked the surveillance feed again. The screen was pitch black, displaying the words, "Connect to power," in large font. I knew then that the city must have also lost water and electricity. I had no choice but to review the surveillance footage from before the power outage. Over a month ago, the burly men took over my home. Sleeping in 2 separate rooms, my second uncle was knocked unconscious, and my second aunt had no choice but to drag him and Hu Jiabao into the kitchen, where they huddled together overnight. The next day, my second aunt was awakened by a buzzing sound. As soon as she opened her eyes, she found over a dozen blood-sucking mosquitoes swarming around them. One was already perched on Hu Jiabao, leaving a large swollen bite, while another was poised to strike my second aunt. She swatted away the mosquitoes on herself, then quickly moved to shoo them off Hu Jiabao. Unnoticed by her, the mosquito's sharp proboscises had already left a wound on her hand. Blood-sucking mosquitoes aren't that easy to kill. Even we could barely manage with electric swatters and insecticide, so even if you can avoid being bitten, you can't escape them entirely. After all, Hu Jiabao was still just a child. Between days of insufficient food and losing too much blood to the mosquitoes, his cheeks had sunken, and his energy was drained. When second aunt came to her senses and looked at second uncle again, the mosquitoes had already feasted on him to their fill. Second uncle, who had been barely clinging to life, this time truly passed away. Second aunt immediately threw herself onto him, wailing like a ghost and howling like a wolf. Her cries woke up 2 burly men. When they came out and saw the sky full of giant mosquitoes and second uncle drained to a husk, they were also terrified. They quickly grabbed their weapons to fight the mosquitoes. It took them a long time to finally exterminate all the mosquitoes. Then, they turned to look at second uncle. Dead. If he's dead, just throw him out. What bad luck. Second aunt, holding Hu Jiabao, didn't dare to make a sound. In the brief moment they were disposing of the body, I heard her say, "Your father, you're dead, but Jiabao and I still have to live. If you want to blame anyone, blame yourself for being so useless." I laughed in anger. This family was truly selfish, each looking out for themselves when disaster struck. That night, Hu Jiabao developed a high fever, burning so intensely that he became delirious and began babbling incoherently. Auntie was terrified and began rummaging through drawers and cabinets for medicine. Truth be told, there was medicine in the house, but not much. With the apocalypse upon them, such things had long become rare treasures. The burly man would have preferred to lock all the medicine in a safe. How could he possibly leave it lying around? Auntie's frantic search made quite a racket, waking the burly man in the middle of the night. He kicked her hard, sending her flying into a corner, where she lay in too much pain to move. The burly man sat on the sofa smoking, and it took Auntie a while to recover before she slowly sat up. She crawled toward them, undoing her clothes as she moved. "Please, I beg you. My son has a fever. Please give me the medicine. Just 1 pill is enough." The burly man watched her with amusement, unmoved. "Please, I beg you, for the sake of his father who helped you steal so much, just 1 fever-reducing pill is all I ask. Please, I beg you, save my child." Second aunt cried in a wretched state, prostrating herself at the feet of the burly men. She had stripped down to just her undergarments. The days of starvation had stripped her of her pre-apocalyptic robustness, leaving her emaciated, with protruding vertebrae forming small bumps on her back, hardly appetizing to anyone. The 2 burly men exchanged glances, then burst into mocking laughter, their voices growing louder and louder. "An old hag like you, with no distinction between front and back. How dare you even think of it? Ha 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 ha. After a while, when they had laughed enough, one of them kicked Second Aunt in the stomach, sending her sprawling back under the table. The slightly shorter thug walked over, tied Second Aunt to the table leg with a rope, and spat on her. Old hag, stay put. After Second Aunt was dragged away, the remaining burly man took out a fever-reducing pill, walked over to the unconscious Hu Jiabao, and shoved the pill into his mouth. I could clearly see greed on the burly man's face. Sure enough, the man uttered a cruel sentence. Little thing, grow well, you're tender and delicate. A rare, two-legged lamb, with that. The two men ignored them and turned back to sleep. The Second Aunt wasn't wearing any clothes, and her exposed skin was particularly attractive to mosquitoes. She didn't survive that night. Hu Jiabao did indeed return the money, but the ensuing red-eyed rats dragged him down to hell as well. In the end, both mother and son were thrown out of the house. At this point, all the causes from the previous life finally bore their consequences. I put down my phone, closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and slowly exhaled. My heart was filled with mixed emotions, not exactly satisfaction, but no pity either, for this was exactly what they deserved. After that, our family continued to live in the mountains for another 3 years. During that time, we endured scorching heat, bitter cold, dense fog, as well as the endless days and nights of the polar seasons. In the mountains, time seemed to stand still, but as long as our family was together, we never found the days hard to endure or life hopeless. On the spring festival of the 4th year, as our family gathered around to eat dumplings, the old radio left by Grandpa suddenly crackled to life. A deep, stirring male voice came through. Fellow citizens, today we announce that temperatures and weather conditions have returned to normal. The apocalypse is over. Welcome home, everyone. I quickly ran out of the basement, and before me lay a bright scene. The distant mountains were clearly visible, the warm sunlight bathed my body, and the old walnut tree by the door had sprouted tender buds again. My parents and I hugged each other and cried. A month later, we packed our bags and returned to the city, where everything was being rebuilt. Everyone's face was radiant with happy smiles. Later, I heard that those 2 burly men had been taken under military control right at the beginning of the high temperatures. It's truly great that the country has never given up and has always been striving.